meeting. Let's begin with a roll call of members so you know who we are. Mohammed, would you start?
Muhammad Al-Azam, Commissioner.
Hi, Linda Winkler, Commissioner.
Leslie Stambaugh, Commissioner and Chair.
Denise Janess, Liaison.
Diana Cass, Commissioner.
Pam Dick, Commissioner.
Thank you very much for coming. There doesn't seem to be anybody who wants to do public comment. So the next thing on our agenda is the agenda. We approve the agenda. Any discussion? Somebody want to make a motion to approve the agenda?
Sure, I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We've approved the agenda. So we want to start today with announcement, an invitation, a very important one from the NAACP, William Hampton.
Shall I stand right here?
You can stand, you can sit, you can do.
Well, since these guys took my seats here, I'll move up here and pretend to be a commissioner. All right?
Sounds good to me.
Temporary commissioner.
We've got a few extra spots if you want to apply.
Now, applied. My application was rejected by your chair.
That's not true. You know that wasn't true.
All right. So, walking over here to here doesn't reduce my 5 minutes, right?
No, it doesn't reduce your 5
Okay,
minutes.
great. Well, first of all, I want to say good evening to everybody.
Good evening.
The NAACP enjoys our partnership with the Human Rights Commission. We've done a few things together and been successful, so thank you guys so much. Secondly, I would like to say that this is my very first time seeing Leslie at her new age, because yesterday was her birthday. You cannot sing because Leslie said if you guys sing, that reduces my 5 minutes. So you cannot sing. Third, I'd like to say that it's important to mention, aside from what I'm going to talk about, that this month, October, is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And I wear this pin because of it. I'm committed to wearing something pink every day during this month. And the reason why I am is because every 2 minutes somebody is diagnosed with breast cancer. And the reason I say somebody as opposed to women is because on rare occasions men get breast cancer as well. So that's my plug. And I want to now introduce myself. I'm William Hampton. I'm with the NAACP. And the purpose of my visit is to let you know that we have our Freedom Fund dinner coming up. And our dinner is designed to showcase students in Ann Arbor who have a 3.2 grade point average or higher. Most of those students are marginalized or objectified here in this city, as they are most places. We will probably honor more than 100 this year.
Wow.
We have 244 eligible children who could be there. Our event is a little different from most people's events. Our event is all about showcasing the children. So we don't have a keynote speaker, but we have a child that speaks from every public school in the city. And they are compelling. If you've ever heard them before, they are compelling. The topic is, when we fight, we win. So everybody has to address that topic. And it's been our experience in the past that even though that's the topic, each student addresses that topic in their own special way. And it would be nice this year if you guys, we always have visitors. You guys, several of you guys always come. It would be nice if we could get a sponsorship from either some individuals here or the commission in general. And this is our program from last year, and we placed the individual sponsorships on the very first page. And we also have a Where Are They Now student, a student success story that's placed in here. And just in case somebody in here does not know who we are and what we do, we fight for marginalized people, the truly disadvantaged population. And we've been doing it for over 100 years. The NAACP was founded in America on the 12th of February, 1909. And that was a real huge spike in lynchings. So every local organization is known as a branch. Like Ann Arbor is the Ann Arbor branch. The one at the schools are chapters. But the local organizations within the cities are known as branches. And the reason why that is because it symbolizes the branches where those individuals who were lynched at. So the Ann Arbor branch of the NAACP was founded originally in 1949. So we've been here for a while, 70 years this year. So in closing, I'd just like to say once again, thank you so much for allowing me to be here. Collaboration is always better than competition from my perspective. And I asked Leslie if I'd have time for questions and answers, and she said no. So I'm going
Ask him a question.
I'm going to be doing what Leslie told me to do. I'm going to be excusing myself.
But before you do, let me just say that this is really a very inspirational, amazing event. I mean, I've been impressed every year, and I'm very sorry that I'm going to be out of town this year. But I hope people go. Russell and I usually go, and it's amazing.
Well, we appreciate all the support we can get. All the students who are being honored attend this event at absolutely no charge to them. Our event costs $50. $50 is a very reasonable price for an event held in Ann Arbor right now.
It's good food. It's a who's who
Yeah.
of Ann Arbor people.
Yeah.
It's very neat.
If somebody wants to sponsor, where
Yeah.
would they go? I don't see like a website.
Well, I'm sorry the website's not on there, but it is beyond my memory right now.
Okay.
But we can find. I know where
But
it is.
yeah, right. The phone number is on there, and
Okay. Okay.
we have a different setup this year for receiving money. So
Okay.
if you call somebody, either take your information over the phone, or
Okay.
they will come by and
Okay.
pick up your check and
Okay.
visit.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay?
Thanks so much.
So
All right.
along those lines, before you leave,
Yes, ma'am.
what is the sponsorship?
It's $40 per student.
No. If you want to be listed in the booklet for the sponsorship?
You can be in the booklet for sponsoring one child, $40.
For $40. Okay.
I mean, we'd rather you sponsor.
More.
We had 244 kids who were eligible, so if you want to sponsor 244, you can do that for less than $1,000. All right.
Good
Thank
deal.
you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. The next thing we're going to talk about today is conversion therapy, or reparative therapy, as some people call it. And we have talked about it in the past. We have had an offer from our city attorney to draft an ordinance. We've seen some ordinances from other municipalities. I talked to Margaret Radabaugh today, and she said, first of all, now that she's back, she has been given the task, so, and she does not even know how far along it is. But rather than wait, I think we should start gathering our information now. We've got a resource list already of people nationwide who want a copy, who would like to see the draft and respond to the draft. Thank
No,
you.
he just handed you something.
He just handed me.
That's just a birthday card.
Thank you. It is an inspirational card. It's always dangerous, dangerous and fun and informative. So we know we're going to have people look at it in great detail once we've got a draft, and in some ways that's the best way. But given the fact that it's taken more time than we thought, I think we're going to hear from these people who are all have looked in this, care a lot about it. Some of them have a lot of experience, and we will learn more and at least be able to provide them with a list of things, especially, and what I've asked for is especially, what is it we need to have on this to make it a really effective ordinance? We're probably, I think everybody that I've talked to, people like the Human Rights Campaign, people nationally who know about us, would like to see this be a model, something that other municipalities could adopt. And so what would it take to make it that good? So that's one of the things we're asking from them. We're also asking them about, what kind of pushback are we going to have, and what kind of response. I mean, what are the key issues we're dealing with here? And I think we know some of them, but I think we don't know all of them. And this is a great chance to tap other people's wisdom, and we have a lot of wisdom in the room. So I've been thinking about how to do this. I think the best way to do this is to have each person speak. We ask just questions about clarification, and when they're all done, we bring them all here and we just talk. So I suggest you write down your questions, any clarification questions separately. We'll handle that right away. But the questions it triggers in your mind, and then we'll have a nice discussion after everybody's had a chance to speak. Does that sound reasonable? So I would like to start then with Dr. Gary Harper, who is a clinical child psychologist, U of M professor, and director of Mental Health Access Coalition for Michigan's Youth. And you can say any more about yourself.
Great, thanks. So the handouts are a little confusing because they're the same color and they look very much the same, but they're in groups of 2, so you might have gotten one but not the other. So those are there. So first of all, I'm really excited to be here. As Leslie said, I'm a clinical child psychologist with over 30 years experience working with children and adolescents. I've worked on issues of conversion therapy for about 20 years now. I was the chair of the American Psychological Association's Committee on Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Concerns, and during that time, we were putting together a task force to look at the research on, at that point, we were only looking at sexual orientation change efforts. And so we created a task force. We had a report that came out in 2005, which showed that there's no scientific evidence whatsoever that sexual orientation can be changed. Since that time, there's been multiple other reports. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is the U.S. government's body to really lead mental health efforts in this country, came out with a report in 2015, which also showed that there's no evidence that conversion therapy can change either sexual orientation or gender identity. And this report was focused just on youth. The APA initial report was on all ages. But among youth, what they found is that it also has very harmful and negative effects on the child. And in that 2015 report, they called at that point, the U.S. government called to ban all conversion therapy, and that was under the Obama administration. And the president even came out with a statement about banning conversion therapy as well. That document, when it was a consensus report, so they really pulled data from all of the major mental health and medical associations. So I've been working with and representing the American Psychological Association, but the American Psychiatric Association was there. Also, counselors, social workers, nurses, medical doctors, every organization. And currently every single organization that provides any kind of ethical standards and licensure for mental health professionals has a statement against conversion therapy. There's been some more recent data now showing actually the severe harm that it causes. Because in the initial report we did in 2009 with the APA, we were able to say that it doesn't work, but we didn't have the evidence to show that it causes harm. Part of that from a methodological perspective is that what happened is that people died, committed suicide. And so studies were not publishing those findings because they didn't have large enough sample sizes to actually complete the studies and to publish them. So, but what we found, there's a paper published in 2018 by the Family Acceptance Project out of San Francisco, which has been doing a long-term study of LGBT youth. I actually worked on that project in the very beginning stages, and that has shown that conversion therapy, they look both at conversion therapy by mental health professionals and also by parents, and that if it was just mental health professionals, it's about a 3 times, they're 3 times more likely to commit suicide or to attempt suicide, and then if they are getting it from both parents and a professional, it goes up to 5 times more likely to attempt suicide. And then 2, there's been the Williams Institute at UCLA, which is an LGBT public policy institute, where I spent some time during my sabbatical as a professor in the law school. They came out with a report, and I've got a copy of it, and they just updated it online as well. It was really the first national probability sample we have that looks at how many LGBT people in the U.S. have experienced certain health outcomes, one of which was conversion therapy. And here's a copy. They just did an update in June. And what they found in that is that over about 68,000 people in the U.S., LGBT people, have experienced conversion therapy. And their estimates based on this is that about 18,000 people between the ages of 13 and 17 will experience conversion therapy in states that don't have regulations against it. So this is a real issue. It's not something that's just happening in dark corners somewhere, but it's a very prevalent, unfortunately, a very prevalent type of therapy. Now the tricky thing is that a lot of the conversion therapists have kind of gone underground and they've changed the name, so they won't talk about conversion therapy anymore. They're calling it things like reintegrative therapy, and even some of the people who are supporting reintegrative therapy have gone as far as trying to show neurological evidence for how reintegrative therapy works. One of the problems too is that I'm an openly gay man. I've been doing LGBT research for all my life. A lot of us who are in the field and doing work on sexual orientation and sexuality, study all aspects of human sexuality. And there was a study that was published that showed that, particularly for women, that sexual orientation can be fluid, and that it can change over time. So these folks have used that to say, oh, if it's fluid, we can turn you straight, basically. And so now they're getting trickier. So there's Reintegrative Therapy Association. There's also something called Sexual Attraction, Fluidity, Exploration, and Therapy, or SAFE-T. So what's happened is that they're using different names, and they've got PhD clinical psychologists on their boards. They even have a journal. So we have to be really, really careful when it comes to pseudoscience, because there's a lot of this work that is not supported by really hard scientific data. Now, when it comes to children, the picture's a lot clearer. And I'm currently working with both folks in the Michigan House and Senate. There's a bill in the House and one in the Senate right now. It's been tried in the House, I think this is the 3rd or 4th time, and in the Senate 2 or 3 times. It's ever made it out of committee. I've been working with Senator McMorrow's office to try and get it out of committee. And so actually we were crafting a letter today, myself and a pediatrician who's worked with youth for about 30 years as well. So we're trying to approach it from different perspectives. The perspective we're using now with the Senate committee is that there's a lot of talk now about ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. And so the CDC and Kaiser Permanente did a huge study that shows that the more ACEs you're exposed to, the worse your health outcomes are later in life. Higher suicide rates, lower job attainment, lower education, things like that. In the Senate, the senator who is chairing the Senate Committee on Health Policy and Health Services just introduced a joint resolution, it's Kurt Vanderwall, into the House and the Senate, saying that we need to focus more time, energy, and resources on ACEs. So what I've been doing what some of my colleagues are doing is showing evidence that conversion therapy is an ACE. And so since he's supporting this, of course he would support this legislation. And there's, again, increasing evidence. A new article just came out on September 11th, actually, in the New England Journal of Medicine that looked at transgender adults and those that were exposed to gender identity change efforts before the age of 10 were 3 times more likely to have attempted suicide, and then also their current psychological state was a lot worse. So we have evidence now that we didn't have before, that when you expose children under the age of 18 to conversion therapy, that you can that it causes a lot of danger, a lot of harm. The other thing is, and I'll close soon. I can talk about this forever, but is that, you know, as a clinical psychologist, and I'm not licensed in Michigan because now that I teach and do research, and I'm also doing a lot of global work on these issues. So I don't practice anymore, but as someone who's practiced for many years and been part of and a representative of the American Psych Association on Capitol Hill quite a bit, all of our professional associations say you can't do this. And the legislation that's currently in the House and the Senate says that licensed mental health professionals cannot practice it. And so what we've done is taken and then we go to the public health code and the list of all those people that are considered licensed mental health professionals under the public health code, and we've mapped on every single one of those. In order to be licensed, you have to adhere to the ethical guidelines which say you cannot do it. So really, if anyone did practice it now, it would be an ethical violation. So we need the law to catch up with the ethics, is basically kind of what's happening. In terms of the resistance, most of the resistance is religiously based. And part of the challenge with the Senate legislation is that Senator Vanderwall is very much focused on faith-based issues. But we've been using and talking to him about the fact that if we're looking at the legislation for children, it's about protecting children. And there's nothing in the legislation and the language about faith communities at all. If you are, and the tricky thing, because I also work with the Trevor Project at a national level, which it has a 50 Bills in 50 States campaign, and then also with the Williams Institute. One of the things that's a challenge is that we would love to see conversion therapy erased everywhere, but from a legal perspective, the easiest win is really to focus on minors. There is some legislation at a federal level that is trying to look at conversion therapy as fraud if people are billing for it, because it's a practice that has no standing. It would be like giving someone a medicine that has not been approved by the FDA. So, but that hasn't really gone anywhere either. So the fight now is at the state level, and then also we really need cities to be getting on board, because right now with the Republican-controlled House and Senate in Michigan, it's an uphill battle. And it's been a little depressing. A lot of our elected officials who wrote these bills and support them, they're not too optimistic, but I'm stubborn and bullheaded and have been doing this a long time. So I've been telling them we're gonna make this happen. And there's a lot of folks at the national level, so at the Williams Institute and the Trevor Project, who are also looking at Ann Arbor as well. And that if we can do something, because even now with totally blanking on the city that has the ordinance.
Huntington Woods?
Yeah, thank you, Huntington Woods.
There are a couple
The Child USA, which is a think tank on child abuse, they just redid all of their maps to put Huntington Woods on their maps. And so now Michigan, at least, we're a hashtag state as opposed to a completely gray state. So we want to go to blue on Child USA, but at least we've got some slash marks now. So. Yeah, and as we move along, any questions you have, I've worked with children who have been through this. I mean, I've seen the torture, I've heard the stories, and it's heartbreaking. It's extremely heartbreaking, and it's still going on. I mean, I talk to young people all the time that are still experiencing this in the state of Michigan. I'm not as sure directly in Ann Arbor, but it's such a shameful thing to go through people don't want to come out. They don't want to talk about it because it can be so severe. Some forms use aversive conditioning where they electrocute children. They show them images, like different images, and when there's one of someone engaging in same-sex behavior, they shock them. They've done all kinds of horrible, basically torture. It's really considered torture. Yeah.
Any questions about just clarification at this point for Dr. Harper? Harper?
Harper, yeah.
Good. Lost it. Do you have a question for clarification, or do you want to wait for the discussion?
No, you are psychologist or
Yes.
psychiatrist?
A psychologist.
Psychologist.
Yeah.
Can you educate us what you mean exactly by conversion therapy?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for asking. So, so conversion therapy, or sometimes it's called reparative therapy, is a category of types of approaches to change someone's sexual orientation or their gender identity. Early work just focused on sexual orientation, but now with a greater awareness of gender identity and even gender expression in some cases, we now, when we say conversion therapy, we're looking at any kind of change efforts. Some people break it down into what they call SOCE, sexual orientation change efforts, and GICE, gender identity change efforts. The ways that they do that can be very different. So one could be that they encourage people to pray the gay away. I mean, that's actually a statement that's used, and I have a testimony from an individual that we're putting at the state level to legislators there, where she talks about a conversion therapist that was trying to get her to pray the gay away. Some will use those aversion techniques where you pair anything related to same-sex attraction or to gender identity and expression with an aversive stimulus, like a shock. Some of them will go to camps. So there's camps where boys and girls are forced to act in gender-appropriate ways. So girls have to wear eyeshadow and makeup and all these things. They even try and teach them how to walk, how to talk, things like that. So it's a whole category of different types of therapeutic techniques to try and change sexual orientation or gender identity. At the adult level now, it's gotten trickier because they're using, again, a lot of the proven therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy. They're looking at trauma therapy. So things that we use as psychologists in other arenas, but they're now putting it under the guise of sexual orientation. So it's a pretty big category.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions, just for clarification? And let's go on to Richard Phillips and Kate Klein, who are members of, why don't you
Yeah, sure.
introduce yourselves?
Thanks for having us. I'm here with my peers from the University of Michigan Law School. My name is Richard, and Kate and I are the co-chairs of the Outrage, what we like to call it, the Outrage Pro Bono project. And so we're a group in the law school that connects students with opportunities to give back to the Ann Arbor community, in particular the LGBTQ+ community. And so we do a variety of things for that community. We work with attorneys, and we do name changes. We provide that service to a lot of different people. Just this last year, we conducted a name change clinic in which we educated 60+ people on the process of legally changing your name in Michigan, and it was just really overwhelming to see that much turnout and to see that we were really fulfilling a need for people. And so on top of that, we do a lot of advocacy work, so we've helped write amicus briefs for different types of cases in Michigan. We touch on family law as well, adoption, and right now we've been working on a draft conversion therapy ban. So an ordinance that's kind of in the same vein as the other ordinances you might see in other parts of the country. And that's what we're here to talk about today. So I'm just going to go through a little bit about the constitutionality of what we've come up with. And also you have that little skeleton in the back. And Kate will be talking about that near the end of our little spiel. And then in the middle, we'll have Elizabeth and Phil going over the harm sort of dovetailing off of Dr. Harper and the impact that something like this could have, the positive impact that it could have in the community. So, yeah, going in. Basically what this ordinance would do is penalize licensed providers from practicing conversion therapy with minors in the city of Ann Arbor. And so one big thing that would come up with something like this is if the city gets sued. And that's something that stopped a lot of different cities from wanting to take this up. So we've done some preliminary research into what that suit could look like, and oftentimes it would take the form of constitutionality. So people could sue it because it violates their freedom of religion or their freedom of speech, or their right to privacy as well in the 14th Amendment. But looking at the First Amendment, the freedom of speech and freedom of religion claims, the ordinance that we've come up with would probably survive those because we have it tailored to licensed providers. So we saw in a case in Illinois, I believe, a group of pastors was basically trying to strike this ordinance down, saying that it interfered with their rights to, this First Amendment. And what ended up happening is that the court said they weren't even included in the ordinance at all. So it wouldn't even hear their claim. And in the same way, our ordinance doesn't talk about religion, it doesn't talk about pastors in any way. And while, like for me growing up in the church and knowing that the impact the church might have on the LGBT community, that's just one way that we can avoid a lot of potential suits that might make this a feasible thing for the city to push through. And so another big concern is something called preemption. And basically what preemption is, and all this is written down on your one-pager, is when the state government has overriding authority in a certain area. So basically if a city wants to pass an ordinance that violates that state's authority, the state can strike it down and people can bring a suit. But for our ordinance that we've drafted, we've made sure that it aligns with the Home Rule City Act, which is an act in Michigan that allows states to prohibit certain practices if they are, let me say the right words here, detrimental to the health, morals, or welfare of the inhabitants of that city, provided that it doesn't violate state or federal law, and that it's confined to the city's boundaries. And so we maintain that this draft ordinance is doing those things, and it's trying to get at a practice that is harmful to the welfare of the citizens of Ann Arbor. And additionally, we have a penalty. If you want to go through that, penalties are always fun. But we cap those in the ordinance at $500, which is also in line with the Home Rule Act. So we're trying our best, and Kate will talk a little bit more about the ordinance itself. But we're trying to think through the potential suits that might come about. And again, a big part of us wanting to present to y'all here is to hear what you think we should be looking out for as well. But yeah, so now we can go into a bit of the harm and the impact. Elizabeth and Phil.
Great. Yes, so again, as Richard said, so much of this has already been covered very well by Dr. Harper, but just to restate some of that, conversion therapy or reparative therapy has widely been sort of identified as pseudoscience by a number of professional medical and psychological organizations. The American College of Physicians says the practice may be physically and emotionally harmful to LGBT individuals, and found that LGBT youth that were rejected by their families because of their identity were more likely than their LGBT peers who weren't rejected, or they were more likely to attempt suicide, report higher levels of depression, illegal drug use, and maybe at higher risk of HIV and sexually transmitted disease. And then the American Psychiatric Association questioned the scientific validity of the practice and says the potential risks of reparative therapy are great, and again may include self-harm and self-destructive behavior, as well as depression and anxiety, and that therapist alignment with social prejudices against homosexuality may reinforce self-hatred experienced by the patient.
Thank you,
And
Phil.
Elizabeth's going to talk about the history.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us today. It's really nice to meet you all and to be here. We appreciate it. We wanted to just touch on the really rich and incredible history that the Ann Arbor Human Rights Commission and Ann Arbor as a whole has of promoting the safety and well-being of LGBTQ individuals. We can look all the way back to the 1970s. In 1972, Ann Arbor passed a non-discrimination ordinance, and in 1978, we were the first in the state to add protections for sexual orientation, which is pretty incredible, and trailblazing, which I think Ann Arbor is known for. And Detroit followed suit in adding sexual orientation as a protected class the following year. So kind of showing how Ann Arbor historically has been a beacon for other places in the state and protecting LGBTQ individuals. So we saw that support from folks in this room and from Ann Arbor in general would just kind of reflect the historical commitment that Ann Arbor has shown to the LGBTQ community, and just that Ann Arbor has been a beacon of light in the past and has an opportunity again to do so.
And I guess sort of like piggybacking on that real quick. So one of the things that comes up is in, I guess, opposition to the ordinance, or maybe questions that people have, is this a necessary ordinance to pass in Ann Arbor? Is conversion therapy really a problem? And it's totally possible that there aren't any, conversion therapy or reparative therapy places in Ann Arbor, although, like Dr. Harper said, they're usually underground. So there very well could be some here, but the more municipalities that pass these kind of ordinances, and it's Huntington Woods and then East Lansing passed theirs a few days ago, the more that the more ordinances that are passed, the more pressure there is going to be on municipalities like Detroit or places where this is a real problem. So there's definitely like an expressive reason to pass this, to say that this is not the type of behavior that we condone in Ann Arbor, but there is also strategic reasons to pass this as well. And so the last page of your packet has just like an ordinance that we put together based on other municipalities' ordinance. We actually wanted to add one thing under the definition. Right now it says any practice or treatment by any person. That should say licensed provider, just so we're clear about that. Because the ordinance is only to people licensed by the state of Michigan. So these are people who are licensed to give the best care, to provide care to their patients, and conversion therapy is not care that they should be recommending if they're licensed by the state of Michigan. So again, this doesn't include any religious or language against religious communities, provided that there's no licensed provider involved. So a lot of this is definitions, because some people sometimes aren't clear about what conversion therapy is, or what gender expression is, or same-sex attraction. And a lot of these definitions are pulled from Ann Arbor's ordinance. Some of them we've had to accent a bit or add a little bit of information, but hopefully they're clear. If they're not clear, definitely ask us questions either here, or we'll give you our contact information. And then, like Richard said, the penalties are in line with Michigan state law. They're also very similar to what the Non-Discrimination Act penalties are. Right now it's a simple ordinance. If there are other things that you think Ann Arbor would benefit from, or the city attorney thinks should be in there, obviously we would want to help write that or add any assistance that we can with legal research, or anything we can assist with, essentially.
Questions?
I just wanted to start, but I wasn't sure if you had seen, there was an initial draft that the city attorney did of an ordinance. Did you see that?
Yeah, we did. That was actually given, I don't know if the city attorney worked on it, but that was
No, there was one that a student had
Yeah.
done.
Yes,
given to
yes,
the
he
mayor,
was
but-
in our-
He's in our organization.
Yeah,
and we
since then, the city attorney had come up with one, am I right?
okay.
But it was very rough.
If it was rough, but,
yeah.
okay, I just wasn't sure if you had
Okay.
seen it. Okay.
Yeah, I haven't seen the one that
The city attorney one.
not the
Okay.
city attorney
Yeah,
one.
It was awfully,
Well,
well, yeah,
okay.
it was a little,
But
yeah.
then you have seen the Huntington Woods ordinance?
Yes.
And
This-
this is, with that as a base, is that how you?
It's very
Yeah.
similar. It's similar to ones passed in Ohio. It's kind of just like a baseline ordinance. I suppose I came to a committee meeting or commission meeting back in July with the city attorney, and this was discussed a little bit. And I think one of his main concerns is that the city is going to get sued. So I guess the benefit of having an ordinance like this is that it's pretty simple. And I will say that it's really rare that municipalities get sued over these ordinances, and they're almost never successful. There was one instance a few days ago that we've been looking into where Tampa's ordinance was overturned, and that's a very special instance of the judge thought that the ordinance went against Florida state law, so a Florida statute. It wouldn't be applicable here, but the Florida statute says that that nobody can override a physician's.
Physicians basically have this
Right.
autonomy, and there is no right for the state to tell them what they can and can't.
Or anybody. The statute says anybody. It's a very
Yeah.
outdated statute. It's very vague. The judge very well could be overturned. You know, federal judges are overturned all the time. We've looked into that. We don't think it's applicable to Ann Arbor at all.
We don't have an analog in Michigan State law
We've looked, yeah.
to that. And additionally, it's good to note that like the Supreme Court hasn't taken up any of these cases when they do get when they are getting litigated. So
And they're usually litigated at the state level.
In New Jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
they
New Jersey's been kind of the test case. They've tried multiple times and they won't touch it.
Yeah.
How much is this? And I know the state, the bills in the House and the Senate are identical, and it's also very brief too. So is the wording in here in alignment with that, just in case those would move forward? It seems like it'd be good to have some alignment between the two.
yes, that is a good.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
Yeah, and it's very simple. Yeah, the language is very simple, straightforward, and that was reviewed by the folks at the Williams Institute, and they thought that it was a good approach.
Okay.
And again, I agree. I think the simpler the better, because some of the other ordinances that have been more complex, and you find more loopholes and you find more ways to create a lawsuit. But I think when you deal with licensure, it's very clear. And two, the public health code for the state is very clear about licensure as well, and that's what the state bills are focused on, is like creating language within the public health code that would provide consequences for people who break the code if they practice it. So.
Have there been any, I wonder if you know from talking to people in Lansing whether, so we've worked on issues in the past where we've been told maybe you shouldn't because it might have the blowback from Lansing telling cities across the state that they can't do what it is that we wanted to do.
Right.
So I didn't know if.
Yeah, I doubt that would happen. I mean, the good thing is like, so when the bill was introduced in the House, it was actually Zemke, who was from Ann Arbor, who introduced it like multiple times. And now it's Youssef, who also from Ann Arbor. So it's been Ann Arbor folks that have been, introducing this over and over again in the House at least. I mean, the Senate, it's McMorrow. Who was it before that? I forgot. But anyway, but I don't know. I mean, legally, I don't know.
We've discussed that a bit, actually.
You want to talk? It was earlier today.
Yeah, I guess our thing is, that's no reason to not pass an ordinance.
No, I'm not saying. I agree with you. But
Yeah.
Right.
And then another thing is we found that in 1991, Ann Arbor passed a very interesting domestic partnership registry, which was really groundbreaking and, like Elizabeth said, trailblazing. And so Ann Arbor's kind of always been on the forefront. And actually the state did pass a preemption that said you can't do this because marriage is the purview of the state. But Ann Arbor was still really proactive about it. It really showed that they support their, LGBT community.
I think another thing, and this is one thing when I was at the Williams Institute, the folks there that are really kind of running all the efforts, kind of at a national level, were saying is that they really encourage at all levels to have this, happen at city levels, everywhere, because part of it is really just the press. As well, and that we need this out there, because I know when I talk to fellow psychologists who really don't work with LGBT populations, I was just talking to a clinical child psychologist who just moved here from North Carolina, and he was like, "You mean that still happens?" I'm like, "Yes, it happens all the time, and I see the effects of it." But he was shocked, and so I think some people just think, "Oh well, we don't have to worry about this." But I think the more that we can get it out there, I mean, even lawsuits can be good, because seriously, the press of it makes people aware that this is an issue and people are suffering. Because right now, people don't know. I mean, the pain that people are going through, this is lifelong. I mean, it's horrible, the torture that young people go through, and the rates of suicide. And we don't even know about rates of completed suicides. We only know rates of attempted. But we have no data on the rates of completed suicides for people who've gone through this. And I would say, just based on clinical experience, it's pretty high.
Yeah. Okay, discussion. Where do you want to start? Any specific place?
Can I say one more thing about
Sure.
religion? And you brought up religion
Please,
too.
because religion's an important
Yeah, because I think one thing that's interesting about religion, I put it in one of the fact sheets that there have been a couple of popular opinion polls or public opinion polls looking at people's views on LGBT protections, and so the Public Religion Research Institute found that 69% of Americans and 70% of Michiganders support non-discrimination protection, and that the majority of all major U.S. religious groups support LGBT protections. And that report breaks it down by religious group. The only groups that are not above 60% are evangelical Christians. Also in the state of Utah, it was Republican Mormons that were pushing for conversion therapy bans in the state of Utah. And it was only when it got to the level of marking up the bills that there was some disagreement over gender identity, and then it got killed. But it were Republican Mormons who were supporting this. So the Mormon Church, even the leaders of the Mormon Church, have said, we will not oppose this. This is not something that we think is appropriate. They haven't come out affirming, but they haven't been opposing. But I think oftentimes we think about religion. I was raised in the church. Grandfather was a minister. My cousins are currently ministers. I think that we think about religion as a negative force, but it's also can be a very affirming, positive force. I know that a lot of churches are very supportive of conversion therapy, and of conversion therapy bans. Sorry about that. And so that might be something to think about too. Is kind of getting kind of preempting any potential religious comments against it to have to show the religious support of it, because really, if you think about it from purely if I'm Christian and studied Christian theology and other areas of ministry, if you look at the philosophy of Christianity, conversion therapy totally goes against that, because you are causing danger, you're causing harm to a child. And really, if you look at biblical scholars, there's discussion about whether or not the Bible as a text even really does condemn same-sex behavior. It's been interpreted so many times, things like that. So anyway, but I think more and more religions are doing same-sex marriages, having affirmative spaces for LGBT youth. And so I think that there would be a lot of positive support for this type of ban. And I think, really we're talking about child abuse. I mean, that's really, for me, when it comes down to, it's child abuse. It's child abuse and it's torture by licensed mental health professionals. So people are getting paid to abuse and torture children. And that's, for me, that's just where it's like, who can support that? Who can say that I support that? We now have the scientific evidence to show that it's torture. Several think tanks in child abuse are now considering it child abuse. And some of the laws, I know at the Williams Institute, some of the angles they've been trying to use have also been to classify in some states conversion therapy as a form of child abuse, to try and attack it from that angle. So there's a lot of different ways. But I think religion could be supportive.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Ryan, you want to join us? Are you sure? Because you're welcome to ask questions too. This is where.
I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Yeah, no.
But I have heard people say, like the Quran, for instance.
Right.
Maybe, unlike Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
it really does come down.
Right, exactly.
In a different way.
Yes.
And so it would be harder for people who subscribe to that to maybe embrace what you're saying. And so religion does is the biggest obstacle here. And I know that we're still allowing clergy to do it, but I think that's where
and I think that since we're focusing on licensure and we're focusing on licensed mental health professionals, and as a mental health professional, I have to put my ethics of my profession before my personal views and opinions. So that's part of licensure and it's part of ethics. And I think one thing I haven't heard in a lot of conversations is ethics, because as a mental health provider, we all have ethical codes and we have to adhere to those ethical codes. And so, I agree with you that we don't even want religions to necessarily say we support this, just you do you and we're going to do us, and really we're talking about healthcare.
And this isn't a perfect analogy, but I think you could say the same thing maybe about marriage, right? Because we don't require that religion marries people, but at the state level, we want people to get married for the benefit of society. It's a kind of totally separate civil thing, and analogously, we are licensing medical professionals to operate in a certain way in civil society. People, they're making a contract with the state that they're going to act in a certain way. We're not legislating the behavior of people in the religious sector at all.
But to that point, I think it would have a really positive impact to, get support among the liberal leaning denominations. And if we could, I don't know if this could be a possibility, but somewhere down the line, if we could solicit the help of some different churches or some rabbis or imams or clergy people in the area to speak in front of city council or something, just voicing their support, in order to just put it out there that while there are certain religious sects that are against it, that's not the only narrative that's out there. So I guess that leaves one question that we have. What would the process look like of moving this forward potentially?
The process, you're talking about the process of writing or the process of trying to sell it to city council?
Yeah,
both.
maybe getting all of it. Like the recommending or resolution recommending an ordinance or getting a vote on that.
We would have an ordinance and we would have a resolution, I assume resolution to support ask city council to support the ordinance. I mean, that's the technical thing. But the writing, our thinking is, as I said, we've got a resource group of people who've already said, please let us read it and give you comments. So once we get the first draft, that's my intention, is to send this out and get comments back and then meet with the attorney and with the group and do any rewrites that make sense. What you've made me think about is maybe the need for a group that wants to go out to religious communities and talk about it, or, that,
Once we have
once,
an ordinance.
yes.
Yeah, exactly.
First you need the ordinance. I
Well,
think.
once,
First you need the actual
Maybe-
piece of,
yeah,
I
but
think
may-
you
but-
do, otherwise you need to look at the definition that we're trying to.
oh, yes, oh,
You
yes,
have
oh,
to
yes.
have the
No, you have to have the
language
ordinance.
to sell it.
But I don't know if you have to have it passed. It may
Oh,
be that
well,
you
yeah.
do it
Yeah.
Yeah.
somewhere in between.
For procedure, so once, if you have a sponsor, I'm assuming maybe the HRC might be your likely sponsor to bring this up to council. They will have a first reading. So that's kind of the first opportunity for everyone on council and the public to provide commentary and just saying, hey, hey world, this is what we're thinking about doing. They'll set it for a next city council meeting, which will give the public an opportunity to come in and weigh in, provide any input or feedback back. So that would be an opportunity. So if you were looking for people in the community to come in and share their support for your ordinance as it was drafted, or any concerns that they have in terms of like drafting language or anything like that, that's an opportunity for them to come before the second reading, before they make any decisions about, form and content, so that before it's passed.
And they can always write to city council members, they can send email, they can call them up, they can do whatever they want to lobby for it. It's a small town.
Yeah, and lots of lawyers in it. Lots of opportunity, and religious people, and people who are interested in this subject.
And we can, when we have, as we are waiting now for the city attorney to give us a draft, but we can send what you have given us to the city attorney.
And we will do that,
And
certainly.
we will do that, so
Yeah.
that they can, they can look at this and, sure they're happy for
Have an
whatever.
extra copy, I'll leave it on her desk.
Oh, great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I think one thing. I think one thing that would be important in that process too, one thing I've noticed is that when these issues have been talked about in a lot of different places, there's no mental health providers that are involved in this. So even at like the national level, at the Williams Institute, I was the only mental health provider working on this. It was all lawyers. I mean, nothing against lawyers. And even at the Trevor Project too, it's all survivors and lawyers.
Yeah.
So it's always struck me that this is legislation really dictating our behavior, and none of us are at the table. So I think too, having the mental health community there as well. The good thing is that with the Mental Health Action Coalition for Michigan's Youth that we formed, we have over 50 providers. We just started, and we've got over 50 providers, mental health, physical health, pediatricians, social workers, everything, that are willing to do whatever they can to support this type of ban.
So you might be willing to help speak to,
Oh, yeah.
or provide a recommendation to city council. That would be very nice.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, if there was a
Yeah.
hearing, I mean, we could get a lot of mental health folks here to show, since we're the ones that are going to be impacted more than anyone else.
That would, and maybe that's, I mean, when we get to that point, we're not at that point yet, but when we get to that point where we have something we really want to, this is it, we might do that with mental health professionals, with attorneys, and maybe with the gay community as well.
Yeah.
Saying, we all want this a lot. And these are the reasons. I think that could be really powerful.
Yeah.
In terms of sponsoring, I imagine, right, y'all would have to take a vote, and they're the city council
And it doesn't
liaisons,
have to go
right?
through us either. Any two city council members, since the city attorney is writing it because we sort of asked him to, it could go through us, but whether or not it goes through us, we'll probably pass a resolution in support of it. In any case, I think it takes, we don't sponsor it at city council, it takes two city council members, or any one city council member, but often, the chances are in this case, there will be at least two, if not more, sponsoring it. And then city council takes it up, and we're sort of out of the picture at that point, except that we can help coordinate speakers to show up.
Should we talk to city council members and ask them for their potential sponsorship, or is that something that
I think once the
y'all would do?
ordinance is
Okay.
done
Yeah.
and they have something to look at,
Yeah, let's see it.
and then it's good just to lobby them one-on-one a little bit.
Right.
Just meet with them for coffee or whatever.
And we've done
Yeah.
that too, and maybe I mean, that's the kind of thing where it'd be nice to take one of you with us. No, yeah, seriously,
Yeah.
a group of people.
And at this point, we haven't heard that there's any opposition, so it's not clear
Right,
that this will be an
But if-
uphill battle. It's unclear.
yeah. I wanted to ask you, do other people have issues?
Not
Oh,
issues, just questions.
Ask questions.
Several questions. So outside of Huntington Woods and Lansing, do you know of other municipalities that have passed either ordinances or
I've heard of 2 others.
anything in reference to this?
Not in Michigan.
No.
Those are the only two.
Are you sure? Because I thought, we heard 2.
Two
I've
more?
heard 2. One recently and one after, I'm sorry, I'll try to remember what they are. One of them is in the Detroit area, I think North Detroit area.
It's Huntington Woods. They passed theirs in July, and it was the first one in the state.
Yeah.
And then East Lansing was a few weeks ago.
It's recently, yeah.
Yeah.
No, and there were 2 in between, I think.
Oh, yeah, let us know.
Okay. Small, like, you and I were talking about it. You were sorry that we weren't the first. You thought you could.
Yes.
Who would
Want
be
us
the
to be
best?
first, yeah.
Yeah, we'll try.
And so my understanding is that your draft focuses on licensed professionals. So what happens if the licensed professional is also a minister?
Well, to that we would say, because we're discussing this as well, in a personal capacity you can have whatever views you want, you know. But as soon as they start to put those views and then put those practices in their capacity as a licensed professional, as a healthcare provider or a therapist or whatever, that's where you would run into the ordinance. Because then at that level it's more about like the safety of the child, and it's more about the welfare of the community and not so much at all about their religious beliefs or their capacity as a practitioner of any religion. Does that make sense?
Yes and no, and I'll
Sure.
tell you why. In the capacity of a minister, that person has a congregation that they may regularly address, and the subject matter may be this. Not in their capacity as a practitioner, but strictly in their capacity as a minister. So how does this ban, once it goes through, apply to that individual? They're a licensed clinician. They hold 2 positions. They are an ordained minister, recognized, licensed by the state. They are a licensed practitioner, and in this case, a psychiatrist. So both positions, this individual performs successfully, derives income from both entities, counsels and practices, and psychiatrists, you know, have the privilege of dispensing meds. So in their practice as a clinician, they're counseling individuals. But in their position as a minister, they are also disseminating information to their flock, to their congregation. They're not necessarily crossing over or combining or merging the 2, but I know of an individual who is exactly in this position. The 2 professions don't necessarily come together, but this individual has the distinction of being able to do both, and could make a solid argument that they are not doing this in their clinical profession, but they certainly have every right and can do it in their denominational ministerial profession. So how does this then, how would this ban affect that individual? And I know of one, but I know that
There
there
are
are
many.
many others.
Yeah.
I think that individual would be right, that they can, that's their First Amendment right to practice their religion, to say what they want in their minister capacity. But once they step into their psychiatry profession, they're regulated by the state of Michigan, they're licensed by the state of Michigan. How Michigan defines being licensed or accepting money for services, when he's acting or they're acting in that capacity, then this ban would come into effect. It's totally possible, and it's very probable that there will be people who are affected by this, but as long as they're not practicing reparative therapy as their role as a psychiatrist licensed by the state of Michigan, then there's no conflict between this ordinance and that individual.
Yeah, I can imagine, like if his flock or their flock is a way that they, get patients or whatever, and they talk to concerned mothers and fathers, and they're like, okay, I have my practice, sign up your kid. And then if that's where the conversion therapy comes into place, that would be like a violation of the provision, and that would be the civil infraction and the fine. But as much as I would love to outlaw, that little bit, I think this might be the closest that we can get to that. And it still, does the work of delegitimizing what they do in their office, So as soon as a parent might be like, hey, you're preaching about all this to me in church, can we put that into practice? They're gonna have to say no, because everyone's in agreement that it is harmful to the child. And so I think it still might be able to make that impact that we want it to have.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
I used to be a clergyman, a Baptist, as a matter of fact. And in my long career, I ran into a lot of conversion therapists masquerading as pastors. Well, first of all, is conversion therapy widespread among professionals?
Well, I would say that it's the most common are religious individuals, so pastors, ministers, and then some are counselors, social workers, psychologists who are not religiously affiliated, but the vast majority of people who practice conversion therapy are religious folks.
Right.
But it does say, sorry, on your fact sheet, and this is a number that I've heard too, 16,000 LGBT youth will receive conversion therapy from a licensed healthcare professional. So it is still quite prevalent.
Definitely, yeah. And we don't even know what the numbers actually are for religious folks, because we don't have those
People are given
For non-licensed people.
Right, exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, in my experience, evangelical fundamentalists, whatever you want to say, ministers in my own denomination would see conversion therapy as part of their ministry.
Yes.
And those are the guys I'd like to go after.
Yeah. Well, a lot of us would.
And I think you should add to your list exorcism. That's another method
Goodness.
to use.
Yeah.
Torture.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh my goodness.
Continue.
That raises, maybe I'm changing the subject, but let me just raise it. It raises the question about how it's enforced. And clearly, I don't think you're going to have police listening to, going into church congregations, and this is probably going to be complaint-based.
Yes.
Like the Human Rights Commission is. And we handle things based on complaints. And then we go out, we have a similar penalty, amount of, the amount of money that are penalties per day. But once we go out and find an incident, then we can mediate. We can let them know they're against the law.
Right.
We can we can take it to the city attorney and ask for a suit if it's terrible, but we could also mediate, or we could also say, you can do this if you say that in your, if you make sure that people understand that you're not doing this as a psychologist, but you're doing it as a pastor. I mean, you know, so it's, we might have to spell out the way it's enforced more, but I think that a lot of this may have to do with enforcement.
Yeah, and actually, when you say that, it makes me think about the fact that too, and I agree that it probably will be complaint based. So you know, it's going to be young people who have experienced this who are bringing up this issue, and all the folks that I talk to are young people who have been tortured. But I think the good thing is that if there is a city ordinance, that will then bring light to what's going on, so that then they can also be brought up on ethics charges and lose their license. Which is going to be really important and really critical. You know, because I was thinking about your example with the psychiatrist. If the psychiatrist did engage in any type of conversion therapy within the context of their practice as a licensed psychiatrist, the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, has a very strong code of ethics denouncing conversion therapy. And so it would just be like someone giving their patient, some kind of medicine that could kill them. And so they would actually be brought up on ethics charges and then lose their license. So the city ordinance would be good because it would then bring light to something that we could then get the ethics review committee, both at the state level, but then also at the federal level as well. Because with the state licensure with Laura, there's a lot going on right now with the counselors and what licensed counselors can do, because they're making it so that they can't diagnose anymore. At least that's what's being put forward at the state level. But anyway, but within the licensing board, we could definitely, anyone at the state level could be brought up on charges and ethics violations. But then when you get to the federal level, because like with different mental health professionals, we all have to get licensed, we have to pass the federal exams, right? And so we're connected. So I have an ethical code that I have to adhere to that's at a federal level. And so if I'm a licensed psychologist, I have to deal with the state, but I also have to deal with the federal as well. So my profession and my state can also bring punitive charges toward me. So yeah, so that I hadn't thought about that before, but I mean that's something that this process could start a lot of other charges that could be brought against that individual for the abuse.
And then same thing, I just want to address your point. I think, so I grew up in the conservative church as well. Now I'm still in the church, but have shifted majorly. But in the way of making it possible to have these punitive damages or making it possible to have people lose their licenses, I think that, as I was saying before, it's important to do everything we can to delegitimize this kind of thing. And while we can't get at that through the church itself, we can at all these other angles. And I think the answer to, I feel like, obliterate this practice within the church isn't perhaps isn't a top-down law that would be challenged constitutionally, but I think the only way we can do it is by giving the kids who this impacts all the tools possible to challenge it themselves, while making our culture and the things that we say such that people who think that's an okay thing to practice feel alienated. And those numbers do dwindle, and the people within those congregations who don't feel right about it, this might be the thing that tips them over the edge. And then in that way, I think we can fight those people who we also want to get at. And then second, if y'all have not names of people, but names of churches that you know that have these practices in this area, and you'd be willing to share that with us, I think it could be really helpful in showing our justification for pushing this kind of thing through. So if you know people who know people, that would be really helpful for us as well.
Well, I was going to suggest that when you get this done, I'd go after church hierarchies, ethically. I mean, of course, the ethical responsibility of their member pastors. Other than that, as the population becomes more educated, pressure on the, bottom up. But I think it should come from the top down.
So one thing that I'd have a concern about though with getting churches involved, and this is something that I know in work that I do with the APA at a federal level, is we're very careful not to get churches involved because we speak as an organization, as a scientific organization. And so the thing is that I can argue science, I can't argue religion. So when I speak like on the Hill on behalf of the American Psych Association, I speak in terms of science, and I have 100,000 scientists behind me. And so we have to be really careful to even talk about religion. Because the second you even open the door to religion, then the waters get muddy. The science is 100% clear. There's not even a gray area. It's 100% clear. Every organization that regulates mental health in this country and worldwide, there's worldwide bans on this as well, supports that this is a abusive and trauma-inducing approach. So I think that's what we need to stick with, is that scientifically, this is what it does. Our job as society is to protect children, because this is children under the age of 18. And really below the age of 18, you don't have rights to seek mental health services without parental consent. And so we're talking about a very, very vulnerable population. You can get services for pregnancy or sexually transmitted infections, but you cannot seek mental health under the age of 18 on your own. So we as a society have to protect this population. That's our job, and that's our purpose.
This law can help get that done?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
One final, sorry. So do you know the status of the two bills that are in Michigan? And I ask that because two things. We, as a commission, discussed in proposing language relative to banning the box on applications. And we had bills that were in Lansing initially, and there were two that were in I don't know where they were, but anyway, the point is that initially there was legislation that was prohibiting municipalities from enacting that legislation. And then the governor himself signed that, the former governor. Then prior to him leaving office, he reversed himself and in September of 2018 and said, okay, you can do it, but at the state level, just for state applications. So I'm just wondering if this may have that same process in terms of you already have bills that are in Congress that are trying to enact legislation based on what you've indicated, and how the likelihood of this perhaps being passed that would then not even require the local municipalities to propose language to their ordinances. So just wondering if you have a sense of the status of this, because it's in Congress,
State legislature.
State legislature, yeah. But I'm just saying, our experience with the ban the box was just that. We were talking about it, we gathered lots of information, we saw that there was legislation, and then the governor, initially enacted legislation that said no, and just before he left office, he reversed himself. There were, I think, at last count, over 30 states that have enacted legislation for ban the box. I just wonder if you have a sense of other states that have, or the percentage or even the number of states that have enacted legislation like this. It could be
9 states have enacted conversion therapy bans, and usually it starts at the municipal level and then it moves up. And actually, so that's what happened in New York. New York City was kind of a trailblazing municipality, and then there were other municipalities that adopted it, and then eventually, because state legislatures are usually more conservative than liberal cities, but eventually New York State passed a conversion therapy ban, and then actually New York City, to they rescinded their conversion therapy ban so as to not interact with the state one. And I think that's a perfectly acceptable model.
Well, the Williams Institute says 18.
Yeah, this says 18
actually.
Yes.
18
states.
states.
Is it 9 states or 18 states?
It's not.
What?
There might be.
Yeah, 'cause
Maybe
it's
states
still-
that are.
Yeah, no, this is the latest of the June 2019 Williams report.
18
says
states, the
18
District of
states,
Columbia,
yeah.
and several localities. Let's go with 18. It
Yeah.
sounds like-
No, I mean, we should get that right. If
Yeah, we
Yeah.
should get it right.
Share
Yeah.
information, so I wonder where the 9 came from. Do you remember?
Yeah.
I feel like it came from a pretty reputable. So
Yeah.
But it may have
We'll
been
double
dated.
check.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll double check.
It is happening fairly often
Yeah.
now.
Quickly,
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I think too, to your really good point about tracking the two bills is, I'm not personally certain of what the status is, but when we're going back to our earlier points about signaling, I wonder if that could help kind of move it along if we're seeing, okay, here's another area that is in support, and so that might signal to people in Lansing, like, okay, we're seeing that the public is behind it, so maybe that could provide some momentum, and if it does happen that they pass it before us, that's okay, we can be like New York. We helped start it, and we're fine with kind of going back on it since it's already at the state level, but I feel like that signaling power could be pretty strong.
Yeah.
Well, I'm working with the Senate side right now quite a bit, and then some of the folks in the House as well. On the Senate side, they're not optimistic at all. And the House are not too optimistic either. In the House, we started in 2014 with putting this through, and they're not optimistic either. And so I think that this would actually help them to be able to see if we have more municipalities in the state, then that would be a stronger argument. I was even contacted actually by the governor's office to see how we could also approach it through licensing boards. And so I'm actually being considered now for one of the governor's boards of psychologists or physicians to see how we can attack it that way, because like the Attorney General's office is not too optimistic that it's happening. So yeah, it's not looking good, but again, like I said earlier, I'm stubborn and maybe overly optimistic and bullheaded, but I've also been doing this for 20 years, so you know, and even the fact that we have as many as we have now is huge, and the fact that it's out there in the public discourse, which is really, you know, for me, what I like to see, because people need to know, because silence is what keeps conversion therapy going. People don't know about it, they don't think it's happening, and they don't really know the horrific side of all this. So yeah, so I think we're gonna, Ann Arbor is gonna pass up the state, you know, by leaps and bounds. So, and maybe that could be, you know, again, part of what helps push it at the state level.
Usually what Ann Arbor does, the state wants to do the opposite.
I know.
So it would be really good if you could find some relatively conservative community,
Yeah, no,
get
that's
them
not-
to pass it if you really want to have an impact. I mean, we will also.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting, you look in Ohio, and they've got a number of different towns and municipalities, more than Michigan, I
Yeah,
want to say
that's
9
right.
or 10. And you
that's
think of
so- that's
Ohio as a
interesting.
pretty
That's right.
traditionally,
Yeah.
I would say, red state now,
Yeah.
and we can compare to, I would say, almost any town in Ohio and say,
Yeah.
look, Ann Arbor, better than Columbus. And Columbus has passed an ordinance.
And we just looked it up, and I guess we're happily wrong that it is
Yeah.
18.
Oh, good. Oh,
That's fine.
good. Okay, that's
good.
excellent.
That's a good error.
Yeah.
Other issues that you want to talk about or questions that you have?
But you
No.
should feel free to, you know, keep communicating with us.
Yes.
Via Leslie or Ella.
And
No, we
I've
can
got,
give you our contact information.
Please.
If you have any other questions.
it should be on the sign-in sheet.
Oh,
But yes, and we will definitely send you a copy of the draft too when we get it.
Yeah, to everybody.
Yes, to
Yeah,
all of
any way,
you.
in any way that I can support, or if you want me to
That's
talk to anyone.
Wonderful.
You know, like I said, I have a lot of passion, also a lot of experience with this issue, you know, at multiple levels, and so I'd be more than happy to talk to folks. One thing I'm always cautious and careful about is when I'm speaking as myself, not a representative of the university.
Yes.
So I always have to put that disclaimer in there that this is Gary the psychologist and human, not the professor. So.
Yeah.
So is kind of the next thing we're waiting on is the draft from the city attorney?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Can you
We have no.
please do it?
No, it,
Contact it. There's
Yeah.
no reason you can't also send an email
Yeah.
introducing yourselves, saying, you spoke to us, and we will have sent in your things, and, say
Yes.
you're interested in helping in any way you can, and that's fine.
Margaret is the one who's taking it over. She said she was going to
Yeah.
watch the video for this.
Yeah.
Ariane is giving notes to her. Okay. Can I keep this to
Oh, yeah.
copy and I will
Yeah.
send it to everybody? I'll just,
Have you contacted EEOC to see if they have received complaints relative to this? Because that information, once they've rendered a disposition, it becomes public knowledge. And they have recently issued language, not so much relative to this, but speaking more to sexual orientation and gender identity. They are making a strong argument that it falls under sex discrimination. So I don't know if you've looked into that as a resource, but it may be something that you could look into and request information. They can give you, I don't know if they can give you specific information, but they can give you statistical information, like number of complaints and the specifics of what that complaint is and the disposition. It's another opportunity to show up your argument in support of this.
yeah, yeah, and ours too.
The Supreme Court is currently hearing 3 cases, which could totally change all
Ah.
of that as well, so that's a little
Okay.
nerve-wracking.
Okay. Well, this has been fascinating.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very
Thank you for
much.
having us.
We will be in touch.
Also, sorry a couple of our members are not here, and then we're short too anyway, so we're really down.
Yeah.
It's okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for your questions.
Thanks for coming.
Very helpful.
Had to walk across the street. A short trip, yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
You are welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting.
But it gets boring after this.
The papers are great, so.
Thank you for all the good work y'all do.
Thank you. The next thing we have to talk about is the discrimination in housing issue. And what we really are doing is just giving you an update.
Yeah.
You
So
wanna-
Leslie and I met with Brett.
And Keita. Brett Leonard. Leonard.
Yes, who is head of city planning. And he gave us a little overview of zoning in Ann Arbor. Zoning in general in the United States, why it started, when it started, and how it developed in Ann Arbor. And we talked a little bit about his knowledge of to what extent it was used as a vehicle to create housing segregation. He didn't have a lot of information on that, but he was really interested in finding out about it and was encouraging to us to look into it. He also described the city's upcoming process of creating a new master plan for the city, and how once the master plan is created, then the zoning any zoning changes would follow. That's sort of the vision for the city, and then they look to see whether they want to change the current ordinances. At least that's my understanding. And he told us about some of the city resources that maybe were out there, sent us a link to looking into some of the, zoning maps.
Yeah,
And some of the
they've got city
historical
county
documents.
minutes that go back years.
Right.
For example, they have planning commission things that go back for years.
I don't know that we'll do that, but what we are doing is, Leslie got this started, and Keita and I contributed a list of requests to the Bentley Historical Library.
Yes.
To start digging up some old records on zoning in Ann Arbor, and who, what, why, when, where, and the effects that it had. And this is all with an eye to, you know, looking at the historical context to where we are now and what the effect of zoning has been in Ann Arbor, and whether when we go and revisit the zoning now, we ought to really think hard about what we've done and whether we need to change it in order to remedy what we've created. Really.
One of the things he said that we were looking for him to say, and we were surprised that he just said it, because it was the finding in the book, The Color of Law, and it's something that people are becoming more aware of, is that after the Civil War, when the 3 civil rights amendments were passed, the Supreme Court started interpreting that as not having to do with race, but having to do more with contracts and you know, things that had not. So in other words, they kind of it didn't help people in this country for voting rights, for housing rights, for anything, because they didn't have any protection. In about 1916 or thereabouts, the Supreme Court all of a sudden said, no, you can't do that. You cannot discriminate against race. We've got these 3 amendments, and they really do cover that. The 14th, include the 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment. And before that time, there were housing. I think you all know there were covenants that said you cannot sell this plat to people who have black or African American or Irish descent, or I mean, you know, you could say anything, but you could be very discriminatory. And the laws about where people could live were discriminatory, and the laws about whether a new apartment that is built, even if it's FHA financed, even if it's, you know, low cost housing where there's federal money, they could say it's all black or it's all white or it can't be integrated. After 1916 or thereabouts, when the Supreme Court said you can no longer do this, somebody had a great idea. We can do it economically. We can say that we can zone this area as single housing. And yes, and you know, just describe how much the plot should cost, and just any minority people, most of them we could make it so they can't buy. And that's affected Ann Arbor also for a long, long time. They were doing that all the way up until almost recently.
It's still ongoing.
And
And I know of an individual who owns property near here.
Mm-hmm. Here meaning the City Hall?
City Hall.
Okay.
African American. Has offered to sell it to the city, but wants a very, you know, he says, decent price, and they've declined to do it. So what he does is the property is such that he rents parking spaces on the property to anyone who wants to pay for that.
Now wait a minute, what, he can't build a house there? Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not so much that. I'm a little fuzzy on the details because I just heard about this incident, and the person who told me is a city employee, and the individual has direct knowledge about this individual, but ironically, his Caucasian counterparts have done the exact same thing in terms of, I think the property is such that they sold the property to someone, and then they've renovated it, and now they've got these like $500,000 homes on this property. This gentleman, however, has offered to do that, but no one has taken him up on his offer. So what he does in the meantime is allow persons to park on the premises, and he makes income, he derives income from that. But along the lines of what you were saying, my experience has been when I worked for the government, it wasn't limited to housing, the zoning. It used to be, and there's a historical data with, I know with EEOC, where they discriminated against individuals in cemeteries. They would only allow you to bury only certain individuals in cemeteries. The insurance companies would redline certain areas so that your rates. Detroit is an excellent example because
Rates
they
are
pay
much
the
higher.
highest rates in the state. There's legislation currently pending before the
Rates for
legislature
what?
for insurances.
Oh, yes.
Pay the highest rates because the insurance companies have redlined certain areas and have said these areas are high risk and they're more incidences occur, so we have to increase the price to cover your vehicle or vehicles.
Auto insurance.
Yeah, and so it wasn't just with the zoning, it was so pervasive, and I think it wasn't so much, I think the turning point was when the Supreme Court ruled that they couldn't do that, and then it shifted to economics.
Yes.
But the practice, there's laws on the books dating back to the 1800s prohibiting that type of conduct. But it was, unless it's challenged, successfully challenged, I should say, not just challenged, then it falls on deaf ears. I'll give you a perfect example. There are laws on the books prohibiting discrimination against persons who are disabled or present with some disability. It wasn't until the Americans with Disabilities Act that kind of supported that. And only then, because individuals who were prominent were being harmed, that law even came into existence. But the Civil Rights Act of 64 prohibited discrimination based on, a number of protections. Right. But it's not, and I'm not saying that we shouldn't address this. It will be a very long process. I'm up for the challenge, but my point is that until you have successful challenges to this, sometimes you don't get the right response.
And that's the problem with, it's a problem with the non-discrimination ordinance. These complaints that we're handling are the way it's enforced.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, but I mean, because we're at a point where the city is revisiting this topic, bringing, I'm hoping, maybe it's naive, that we're gonna find stuff pretty quickly that will be pretty transparently
I think,
racist
yes.
in its intent, and if the city was involved in that, or other government agencies were involved in that, then the city really has an obligation, and even if it wasn't the city, if it was, to look at it and figure out a way to fix it. Especially now that they're re-envisioning the city, so it's good time.
With the master plan.
And that's gonna take a few years, that's the other thing we learned from that, so we have some time.
But it does mean we were gonna have to function a little bit differently than we did before, because we're gonna have to start, if that's what we find that the city has been complicit, then we have to educate, and we have, and sell another plan. The master plan turns out, the master plan doesn't say we're going to do this by this date and this by this date. It kind of sets guidelines that where we're, and there are examples on planning department's website that we can look at. But he's trying to incorporate it all into one big master plan, which will be much more usable. But but one of our challenges will also be if we decide to take this issue up, and we're getting, sounds more and more like we're doing that, then we have to have an idea of what kind of goals we should put in this master plan. They're 5-year plan. 5-year plans?
I don't know.
I may have made that up, but I think they are, and they're ready by 2020. To have enough, to update it. So this is good timing for them, for us to come up with some goals.
Yeah, actually, they're hiring a
It's
consultant
exciting.
now. First, they've got to do the RFP, get a consultant who will help them begin the process, which he thinks will start in 2020 and will take 18 months to 2 years. So we have time.
We have time. But this is a pretty big, you know, if we're gonna do this, this is a pretty big bite, and we're starting. And if you're not for us looking at this, let me know,
Yeah.
because I think this is gonna take a little more and more
And
effort.
Keita already did a little bit of research and very quickly
Yes,
found
Keita's-
some pretty
Keita's-
interesting things.
Yeah.
And that was just with, I think, some Google searching. So I have a feeling Bentley will find some
Yes,
things.
I think it's coming.
We mentioned also last meeting, partnering with Fair Housing.
We will get
and,
Fair
the
Housing here
Planning
soon.
Department,
That's
or
right. Yes.
the Planning Commission.
Oh, that's right.
Prior to the beginning of our meeting tonight, our councilman suggested different subject matter, but still pertinent
Right.
and germane, that along those lines, and I think key for us and them as well, is education. I recall vividly when working for one of our civil rights agencies that we would do quarterly for your information forums, where we would go throughout the state. So we would target a certain area and say, for your information, here's the law, and just in case you didn't know, and then illustrate it with examples. And I think that would be beneficial for us. The reason why is because most people don't know that it is unlawful to deny applicants who have a criminal record to rent.
Yes.
And that is law. So we have, unfortunately, landlords who are in violation of that even now, automatically. It's in their application. Have you been convicted of whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's unlawful.
It's unlawful to ask for that
Yes, it is.
in a rental?
Yes, it is.
It
Yes,
is.
Yes, it is.
Even though HUD is the main,
Mm-mm. Federal law bars housing discrimination against people with criminal records.
would you
Okay.
find out more about that?
Sure.
Seriously?
I recall sharing this when I went to a fair housing seminar in Ypsilanti.
Uh-huh.
2 years ago now, I believe, and that's when I first learned that it was recently enacted legislation. So it is that, and it's also unlawful, which we learned through a complaint. I mean, we knew that it was unlawful, but we received a complaint where they wanted to deny applicants the use of Section 8 vouchers as
Payment, yeah,
documenting
Yeah.
their income.
yeah.
And that's something we're working on now.
Exactly.
And it has to be.
But again.
Jack Eaton was here before,
Mhm.
and he asked that we handle both of these two
Exactly.
subjects.
So I'm saying this can all be part and parcel of this entire endeavor that we're going
Right.
to take on. But I'm saying also in partnership with Fair Housing and the Planning Commission.
Right. And this is the low-hanging fruit. We're almost
Exactly.
there.
Mhm.
So please find out more
I
about
will.
that. You might want to talk to Fair Housing again, because
Okay.
you know,
I think Pam Kitsch, when she came and addressed us, it was more
you
general.
may be right. I remember that
But
HUD
she
is,
came,
is,
when we
do
were
not
meeting in the-
allow
Yeah, it is
People with-
unlawful to do that.
to ask.
For a private landlord too?
I will send you this.
Okay.
This came from,
Yeah, I
this
think
came
it
from
is.
HUD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't,
Mhm.
but in HUD's property, they do not accept people who, my understanding is they do not accept people who have convictions.
But this is a whole nother area, a whole nother topic from what we were.
Right,
I mean,
right.
it's
It
housing
is similar but
discrimination,
different,
it's
right.
not- It's not related to zoning and.
But it is a
That's
It
a-
housing.
isn't,
it's a
but
ban-
this is-
It's a ban the box.
But
issue.
this is now federal law,
Okay.
Yeah,
and HUD can't do it either.
okay.
It
Ooh.
says it in this, let me see if I can share this
That's,
article with you
that's
all.
very cool.
Yeah.
Because that does mean we ought to find something that is developed by the federal, especially by the federal government, if it's a federal law,
It says
and
federal
put it
law.
on our website. I mean, I'm really tired of a website that doesn't say anything. Well, we've got some
Oh, it does,
webpage.
that's fine.
What is our,
It-
I know when I
it has
click on it,
links.
but what is our email?
It's on your
We can-
business
we can tell
card.
you- we can tell
Yeah,
you later.
right.
We can tell you
Yeah.
later.
Because I want to
Let's-
send this
let's
to you
move
now.
on.
Oh,
Shall we move on?
okay.
Let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. ICPAC update, I just want,
Uh,
oh,
we
no,
want minutes.
no, minutes.
Yeah.
We've got to do minutes. That's right, in fact, that's probably Maybe the only thing we have left.
Few more minutes.
I'm exercising my
Yeah,
life.
okay.
I had some suggestions.
Okay.
Changes.
Okay.
Let's see. I can find them. The section about Chief Cox.
Mm-hmm.
This is just my preference, but I would delete that first line. I mean, he said a lot of things, and by putting just one quote in, I don't know, I would rather keep it general and say, I would delete that first line and
Okay.
say, Chief Cox discussed his background and experiences with the Boston Police Department. And then I would rewrite the next sentence to say something like, he talked about sharing information more freely, the importance of community policing and feedback from the community, the role of the HRC and ICPOC and other related topics.
Okay.
Because we don't want it to, this is, you know, these were a few things he talked about, but it was certainly not all he talked about. And I can type that later too.
Okay.
If
You want
that's
to send
okay.
that
okay
to?
with people.
Yes.
Well, we've got to prove it.
Yeah. And then, the other question I had was under housing segregation. The members of our little working group, Leslie's name isn't there,
Oh, okay.
No,
right?
thank you, I
And is
didn't
that-
even see
And
that.
Pam,
Okay.
you did want to be part of that, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Good. Oh, Pam, you want to be part of it also? Okay, good. So actually, everybody's part of it.
Okay.
I can
Okay.
That's good, because we kind of need as many hands on that as possible. Anything else? Linda, was that it?
That's all I have.
Okay. Did anybody else have any comments? Somebody want to make a motion to pass the minutes for,
I move
to pass the
minutes from September 11th.
As amended?
As amended.
Yeah, I'll second.
all in favor? Good. ICPOC update, they are looking for one new member. We are looking for 2 new members. They're going to have a vote on a new chair in their meeting, which I think is on the 18th of October.
17.
17th?
Thursday the
Thank you.
17th.
Thank you. I think that's all I have to say about that.
Do they not have vacancies or?
They have one vacancy.
They have one
Okay.
vacancy, Robin Stevens resigned.
Right, I knew of that, but I'm saying, I thought we talked about this briefly. How were they going to address that vacancy? Were they going to go back to the other applicants? Were they going to open it up again?
I'm not
Yeah,
aware.
thank you for,
Yeah.
I've talked to Lisa about it, and
Okay.
I'm trying to talk to Jane about it, because I know that they are, looking at previous people, applicants. And B, that they are going to ask people internally for recommendations. They have lost, it seems to me that, I think they have lost their only 2 attorneys. With Robin and with Kareem.
No,
I may be,
David
is
Santa
there
Croce
somebody
is an
else?
attorney.
Oh, David,
Yes.
thank you,
Yeah,
thank you.
Santa Croce
Okay. She is
an attorney.
is an attorney.
That's right, I forgot about it. Okay, so, but it leaves a hole, obviously, and they're working on it. We are also working on it for us.
Yeah, and it's,
I think we have at least one candidate.
but we have
2
vacancies.
Yes, yes, and we will.
Okay.
So, but if, again, they're going to ask internally if people have recommendations, and if we have any recommendations, either for us or for them, let us know, let me know, and I'll pass it on. HR. I guess all I want to say is that we will be they have received, they've stopped, we've hit the deadline for the RFPs. Remember, they were gonna do an RFP for the cultural assessment. There's going to be a panel of about 6 people to look at that and make a selection on which. They've got 6 applicants. I'm going to be on the panel, and I'm probably a good person for that because I may know all those people. I don't know if that's good or bad. But it's my expertise, so I let them put me on it. However, we will, once we have it, we clearly have to have somebody who is going to not only do it on paper, but also do it in other ways, probably in-person interviews. And you will be involved in the questions design, as we requested that would happen. I mean, I think it's a good process. And then the last thing is, I hope that Pam, you and Mohammed stay for a few minutes after the meeting so we can just touch base about.
Complaints just for
Yeah.
complaints.
Anything else that we have to deal with? You're coming, do you have something?
I do.
Oh, you do? My gosh.
I was waiting all this time.
I didn't know. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm Ariane from the City Attorney's Office. I'm coming to you to drop news that you can use, but also to ask for your help.
Okay.
So the city is starting our first ever Warrant Resolution Day, which will be December the 16th of 2019. The 15th District Court has approximately 2,300 open misdemeanor bench warrants. So all of those cases,
misdemeanor benchmarks. Would you just say what that is?
And that just means someone did not show up for court at some stage in the process, and the court has issued a warrant for their arrest. Mm-hmm. Now, I've worked with the county prosecutor's office, so they're also going to be participating in this program as well, because it's just too confusing to say, come in on your city-only warrants, and nobody knows if their warrant is a city case or a state case. We'll be accepting everyone that day who has a non-domestic violence or intimate partner violence related case or non-assaultive case. For those of you who are familiar with our street outreach court, it's going to be very similar setup to that. So the 15th District Court will turn into the hallway of services. We're reaching out to our community partners. So we will be asking the assistance of Community Mental Health and Avalon Housing. So far we have Michigan Works, the Shelter Association, Safe House Center, a couple of other community organizations, the Office of the Sheriff, that will be lining the hallways upstairs. So when folks come in to check in, they can have an attorney appointed. Hopefully this will be a day of service for the defense bar, for the criminal defense bar. In addition to that, we'll have our own in-house PDs that will be present. We'll figure out whatever the issue is that was keeping you from coming from court. A lot of it is fear. Most people are afraid to come to court because there are some judges, not in Ann Arbor, but there are judges elsewhere who will throw you in jail over a traffic misdemeanor case. So driving without a license, driving with a suspended license. As you know, that is a vicious cycle, especially if you have children, because then CPS is taking your kids, and so on and so forth, and you're stuck in this horrible trap. Well, the goal is for people to be able to start the new year with a fresh, being able to recall their bench warrants, number one. Number two, looking for community resolutions for these matters. This is what I do 3 days a week anyways during my docket, but this is opening it up to every warrant we have for our 15th District Court in the county, which is pretty cool. And the county prosecutor's office is going along with the same spirit, is that we will hook you up with a community resource in your resolution, and for your working with your community partner, you will, be able to be considered for a reduction or even a dismissal of your charges. So each case is going to be looked at individually, but I'm going to need help promoting it. So I've gone to the city's communications team. They're going to be out, and we'll be on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and all those great social media things. But in your own rights and in your personal lives, you all have very vast networks of social service connections. So I'm going to be sending something out shortly, a flyer just kind of explaining the event, explaining the day. We will be putting
Easy to read.
Yeah, so a lot of the other tricky part is that most of the city cases, there's about 800 city cases alone in this lump of warrants. You're not fingerprinted on the majority of our cases outside of drunk driving. So people might not know. We're going to make an effort to try to contact them at their last known address saying, hey, this is a good day to come in. We're actually expanding the hours of the court, so we'll be open till 8 p.m. So that people are able to come in, which is kind of cool. And they won't have to miss work if they're a first shifter or working during the day. But I just wanted to let you know when that hits your inbox, that's something that the city is doing for the first time. Of the district courts, of the 6, we have the smallest amount of warrants in Ann Arbor. So I'm hoping that this is a successful day that we can provide a blueprint to the other jurisdictions so that they can take it to Ypsi and Ypsi Township, and that all of the district courts can follow suit and offer such a program, which is really going to promote, restorative justice and healing in the community.
I'm a little puzzled. So are there judges involved with this?
Oh yeah, all the judges are volunteering to be there and stay till 8 o'clock, which is awesome.
So one by one or group by group, these people will
One
come
by
in
one.
with their lawyers and their partner, whichever appropriate partner.
Whichever appropriate partner. So that's part of if a lot of people will come in and they won't want counsel. That's just usually what I find. So they'll work with their appropriate prosecutor. So it would just be a one-on-one conversation, figuring out what service they need to help. And I can give you an example. There's a gentleman that I was working with, and he had a couple of retail frauds he had been stealing, and we talked about some of his root things, and he was stealing to support his nicotine habit.
Oh.
So he would steal stuff, try to return it, and then get the money. So that was one of his. So we worked with him. He's got a smoking cessation coach that he's working with a community partner. It's a free service. So he's going to provide proof that he's going to his 10 sessions with the smoking cessation coach, and he's going to do community service, and then he's working on a deferred sentence, so he doesn't have a criminal history for this.
Wow.
So we're trying to be thinking outside of the box on things and meeting people where they are, so that not every interaction that you have with the criminal justice system has to be a bad one. We're trying to find an opportunity for people to be better off after having this interaction. It doesn't always have to be negative.
And all the judges are on board no matter what the misdemeanor offense?
So the assaultive ones are not,
Right.
because we
But
have to
all the
comply with the
others.
Crime Victims' Rights
Okay.
Act, so we have to give notice and things like that. But the probation department is actually going to be available there that day to even do some same-day sentencing interviews, which is pretty great. So there's a provision for HIDA, the Homes Youthful Training Act, which allows for under 24 to have a non-public. Well, it does require that you go on to probation. Even if your probation is like 2 weeks long, you have to go on probation to have the non-public record, which means you have to have a pre-sentence investigation. So the probation department was very gracious, and they agreed to be just on call all day long with all their agents. So as people come in, if HIDA is something that they want to have this non-public record, they're willing to meet with them, take them down, get the screening, write a report, come right back up to the judge, and then do everything in one fell swoop, so that we're not, hey, we'll see you in 6 weeks again, and then more barriers pop up, and then we end up with other bench warrants or show cause fees.
How can you tell people enough so that they can say, hey, this is me, and I can do this?
So, you mean to come in?
Yes.
That warrant day? So
Yes.
I'm going to go to places traditionally where we find people who have had barriers for coming in. So we're going to be hitting the shelters. We're going to be hitting the soup kitchens. We're going to be, being up at St. Andrews. I'm going to be sending things to probation agents. There are a lot of folks who are currently on probation who have open bench warrants in other places that don't want to take care of them because it's just they're walking right back into the jail in some jurisdictions. That's not historically how things have been in Ann Arbor, but if you're not from Ann Arbor and you were visiting for a day and ended up having a case here, you don't know that, and so you don't know that you're not going to jail on your driving with license suspended ticket, and just trust us is not a very effective way of communicating that. So we usually see statewide, regionally, I did a little bit of research. We usually have a 10% return on days of this when you advertise appropriately, but I hoping that we have even greater return just by reaching out to all of our community partners. If you have suggestions on community partners who should be present, I'm definitely taking those. I'm cold calling people now, so.
Have you contacted the VA for their Veterans Justice
Yeah,
outreach?
Yes, we have I'm on the Veterans Treatment Court, so we talk to our liaison there and try to get everybody, so hopefully they'll have a table as well for the day. In addition to that, I kind of think it's just kind of neat. Normally, I was talking to one of the probation agents at Circuit Court. She does felony probation, and I was telling her, I said, this is a really great day. If you have people that have open warrants, this is a day to be able to send your folks down. And she's like, oh, do you know how rare it is to have all like our community service providers in 200 yards of hallway? And I'm like, that probably never happens. She's like, it's like a gauntlet of awesomeness. Yeah, it kind of is.
Oh, it is.
And I'm like, well, send them by, Courthouse is open, send them by. So it might even just be an opportunity. I mean, we're right here on the number 4 bus line, right? And we're open till 8 o'clock, and it might be an opportunity for those who are in need, who want to hit multiple service table. I mean, I plan on reaching out to folks watching on literacy, and I mean, I'd love to see the hallways full of our community service providers, so that we're really circling the wagons around a population of folks that really just need our help. So if you have any suggestions, ASLAY at A2Gov.
Email us this announcement.
I will.
I can put it in our Islamic Center,
Oh, I would love
there are
to.
few people that did that.
So you're gonna give us a flyer or something?
Yes, the communications department is creating something fabulous. I'm sure they always create something fabulous. So they're working on making the flyer for us, and I will send that out probably next week when it's done. But I wanted to come here tonight and share with you what we were doing.
Can you send it to us so we can read it and see if we understand it? Because if we don't understand it, they're not going to understand it, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, and it will be pretty simple, and I'm sure it'll be parsed down from my blabbering zone tonight. But I'm just really excited about the day, and like I said, if Ann Arbor can do this with our smaller population, it's a good blueprint to pass it along to the rest of
So
the
there are
community.
like 2,200 people walking around afraid that they're going to get stopped because they're
And for a
got
lot of people
warrant.
too, some entitlements are. They're afraid of even going in to request for food stamps, any of their SNAP benefits, because they are afraid that they're going to get picked up. They don't know who's going to call or who's not. I mean, it has to be a terrifying experience. So there are kids who will go hungry over winter break because you don't want to come in and walk in on your warrant. You don't know what that's going to entail or how that will unfold for you. So if we can get people's warrants cleared up where they can still make it out to the DHS office before December 17th, which would be the last day to apply for it before winter break, then we might have a few less hungry kids over break.
Boy.
It is just Ann Arbor, though, correct?
It's just Ann Arbor for now. So anything in Ann Arbor City that's a
So
mystery.
not even at Pittsfield Township,
That,
right?
yeah, that would be 14 Court. So hopefully our blueprint, we can provide it to everybody with a bow.
This is just fabulous.
I was going to suggest that next week, ICPOC is having their community feedback session at the Bryant Community Center from 6:30 until 8.
Yay.
So
That would be a
Should
perfect
be
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure
Yes.
that they have their flyers out. Hopefully, maybe they'll be done
On the
before
24th.
Goes out.
We can
That'd be
also
great.
send it to the
Hung out
people
there a
on
whole
our,
bunch as a
Yeah.
kid.
on our
Email
email.
distribution.
We have an email distribution
Yeah.
list, and we'd be happy to send it out to them.
Well, that would be
Thank you
great.
so
Thanks for
much.
giving me your minutes.
This is wonderful. Oh, this was worth it. Terrific.
yes. Thank you.
So excited.
In the future, if you need to speak to us and can't wait around.
Yeah. Oh,
Let
yes.
the chair know.
Oh,
So we can work you into the
If I start fading, I'll let you know.
We can work it into the agenda.
Thank you so much for coming. I'm excited. Well, I think we've had a busy
Yeah.
day.
I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you. Second? All in favor?
Bye.
Thank you very much, folks. Good
Thank you,
meeting.
Leslie.
I'll be sending you all this.
Okay.
I'm excited about it.
Did you have both of
Would you
these?
pass
I
this?
didn't know.
Yes, this is the best.